If you'd like to take a moment to answer the question in the chat box, how has your family influenced your career? It would be great to understand you a little bit more. Your kids motivate you every day. Yes, they do. They're amazing. Anybody else, and how your family has influenced your career? They make me strive for more. That's right. We want better for our children. We want to give them everything and then some. Thank you, Wendy. My kids gave me a new lens to the work I do. They put me on the other side of childcare situation. Ash, they give me purpose to stress management. They bring purpose to stress management. Love that. Love your vulnerability and your honesty, Sheri. So true. I'm going to give it one more minute and then we're going to begin. Okay, Anika, would you mind going to the next slide, please? Hi, welcome to the first of these series today. My name is Peggy, and I am a mother, a daughter, a sister, and an aunt. I am a speaker, a researcher, a consultant. I wear many roles and responsibilities, and I'm also, to keep up with everything I've got going on, a busyness addict in recovery. It's been my experience that there isn't a rule book on how women can juggle all the roles and all the responsibilities. But we're really, really lucky because we have an organization. Next slide, please. The Western New York Women's Foundation that is celebrating their 25th year in helping transform systems, cultures, and policies to create opportunities for every single one of us to thrive. And today we're beginning the Pathways to Progress series, and we're going to focus on childcare and its impact in the woman's economic world. But more importantly, we're going to give you solutions on how to manage it so that it doesn't become a roadblock or a stumbling block. Next slide, please. I would like to take a moment and thank Impresnia Bank. They are an amazing organization that empowers women to be the best possible selves. We are lucky to have them in our community. And we're really, really grateful to have them sponsor this session. Before I introduce our next speaker, Mara, I just want to take a moment and say, as a mother, a single mother, I can remember at many points in my life having to worry about childcare. Who is going to take care of my son? How would I take care of him if I needed to work more hours? And everything that came with it was constantly on my mind. And it was a distraction. And it really hurt me from becoming the best possible version of myself at work, but also at home. But there is help now. And we're going to talk about that today. First is Mara Montante, and she is everything data at the Western New York Women's Foundation. She is the one that has brought all this beautiful research to light, and is going to share with us some of the facts and the figures that she found. Mara?
Thank you, Peggy. Good afternoon, everyone. So according to the Department of Health and Human Services, childcare is considered affordable when it costs families no more than 7% of their household income. Childcare costs in Western New York far exceed this threshold. In Erie County, for example, center-based care for infants costs over $17,000 a year, which is 14% of the median family income for a family of 4. The cost of childcare is even more burdensome for families who earn less than the median income or for families who need care for more than one child. This is important because when the cost of childcare is so high, it often makes more financial sense for one parent to leave the workforce to take on childcare responsibilities, and more often it is the mother than the father. One of the biggest problems contributing to the lack of childcare availability is low wages for childcare workers. Childcare workers earn less than 96% of occupations in New York State, and 12% of them live in poverty. The childcare industry is one of the starkest examples of occupations in which women are overrepresented in low-paying jobs. In New York State, 94% of the childcare workforce are women, and 54% are people of color. The average annual wage for workers in the childcare industry in Western New York was just under $27,000 in 2022. Despite the vital role they play in nurturing and educating our children, the childcare workforce is often undervalued. Insufficient access to affordable childcare has a greater impact on women's participation in the labor force compared to men's. Women are more likely than men to reduce their work hours or leave the workforce entirely when families cannot find or afford childcare. Even when mothers remain in the workforce, many are still responsible for the childcare, and in many cases, this negatively impacts their careers. Approximately 6 in 10 women stated they were held back professionally due to childcare responsibilities, and almost 1/3 said they have been penalized at work for those responsibilities. Even when families can afford childcare, they often struggle to find available slots. In New York State, 64% of residents live in a childcare desert, which is defined as an area where there are 3 or more children for every licensed childcare spot. In Western New York, the number of children under age 6 per childcare slot available ranges from 3.6 in Erie County to 8.6 in Wyoming County. In a 2023 survey of over 1,600 childcare programs in New York State, 90% reported being understaffed. Because of the staffing shortages, almost 67% report reducing their capacity, closing classrooms, or closing on short notice. If women and families cannot find consistent, reliable childcare that is convenient to their home or workplace, they're less likely to participate in the course. One tool that's available to help families find childcare is the Buffalo Niagara Childcare Desert. This is an interactive map that provides visual representation of childcare. There we go. Visual representation of childcare deserts, but it also has many different features to help various audiences understand the availability of childcare in our region. For example, employers can use it to help their employees find convenient childcare. Childcare providers can use it to find areas where they could potentially open a childcare location. And families can use it to find childcare near their homes or workplaces, or an after-school program near their home or school or in their school district. The map. Okay, so I'll show you a little bit on the map here. So as you can see, the brown areas represent areas with no childcare, and then it gets as the beige and light green are low or very low capacity, and the darker green is sufficient capacity or not a desert. So one thing that you can do if you're a person looking for childcare is you can find your location and click on one of the diamonds, and it will show you the type of childcare that's available, when it opened, where its location is, and the capacity as well. And then there's contact information if you're interested in calling using that source. So you can look, just at the map and find a location that's near, and you can also put your address of your home or workplace or wherever you'd like to find it, and it will zoom in on that area. So if you're interested in learning more about exactly how to use it, or you have questions about it, you can email us at the address shown at the end of the presentation.
What an amazing map and what an amazing resource. And thank you so much for shedding light on some of the critical issues. The statistics are a little bit alarming, but once we understand them, we'll be in position to help improve them. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Kristin Macha. She works at Infantile Services at Child Care Resources Network, and she works to ensure that everybody has accessibility to quality health care. She's been there for many decades, and it is a delight to introduce such a hardworking, passionate woman. Kristin?
Thanks so much for that introduction. Yeah, I've been working here at Child Care Resource Network, which is Erie County's local CCR&R, for about 13 years. And prior to that, I was working directly in childcare. So I've had an interesting experience crossing between those two lines, because 8 years ago, I then had my own children, and had to navigate it all firsthand on the other side of things, which is what I had shared in the chat box there earlier. And in a lot of ways, I think that has actually, it has helped to make our organization better every single time one of our employees has to navigate from the outside in. My husband used to say, shouldn't this just be easy for you? Shouldn't we just be able to find a slot somewhere that you like? You know where they all are, right? And the fact of the matter is, no one is immune from the complications of finding quality care. So let's talk a little bit about what Child Care Resource Network is, but also what a CCR&R is in general. Because every county has a CCR&R that is funded by the Office of Child and Family Services to basically be the one-stop shop for all things childcare related. There are 34 CCR&Rs across the state. Those are child care resource and referral agencies. And again, they're funded by the Office of Child and Family Services to really meet the needs of parents and child care providers in the greater community. You can go to the next slide. So okay, I had slid. Okay, I will go back to my notes for this one. So the general services of a CCR&R, like I said, the main purpose is to serve those parents and the child care providers in the greater community around child care issues. So each agency that is a CCR&R has those similar core services to them. Then county by county, depending on the needs in the area and what that specific agency is funded for, the services can differ a little bit. But for the most part, you've got those solid core services for parents and employers and child care providers themselves. At Child Care Resource Network in Erie County, and really commonly throughout our 8-county region, so there's 5 CCR&Rs within that area that work closely together. We have really strong parent services. We help parents create a child care plan that fits their family's needs free of charge. We also provide education in regards to what child care options are available, what quality care looks like, and ways to reduce the cost of care. So why would someone want to call us to connect with childcare versus doing an online search? Well, lots of people don't want to talk on the phone anymore, so it's got to be worth it. And it is. And we do actually also have an online search function on our website. All of the CCRNRs should have that online search available. However, it is tremendously more helpful to call and talk to someone. We have childcare resource and referral specialists. They may have different titles across the state. Internally, ours is a childcare navigator because we felt it was important to capture that navigation aspect of what they do. But when someone calls us or even has a conversation back and forth via email rather than just doing an online search, they get valuable information that they may not find elsewhere or know. For instance, information about the different modalities of childcare. Many of the people who we connect with over the phone have not even heard about home-based options, such as family childcare and group family childcare. So a lot of times our childcare navigator is tasked with sharing the information about what modalities are out there without kind of leading the parent or the family member caseworker who's calling us in one direction or another, because the essence of that call is finding out what that individual family needs for that particular child. In some cases, I know we all would ideally want our children in one place, but there are certain cases where maybe this kind of care, this modality of care would be best for this child, or the logistics of it, like this program is going to be best for this child. And if you have another child, maybe this is an option. It sounds crazy to think that way, but it's the kind of thinking that goes into forming a child care plan, because it's not as simple as these are the hours that I need and the location that I need. Just run me a list and we're going to work from that, because there are differences between those modalities. For instance, we also have connection to our legally exempt department. We have a department here at Child Care Resource Network that enrolls friends and family members who want to become child care providers for their friends or relatives' children, using county subsidy dollars to do that. And while our referral service doesn't refer to specific legally exempt providers, is what they're called, we do often refer over to that department. So many of our clients call looking for care for non-traditional hours, or they need flexible schedules, or they have very, very young children. A lot of times it's our little babies, where the family is thinking, gosh, I'm not comfortable going with a large center-based program, or I really believe that a baby should be cared for within the family unit, or like the broader friend network. And so when parents are struggling with that kind of arrangement, or if they just mention and we know that they're going to qualify for childcare assistance, if it makes most sense for them to then have a friend or relative care for the child, then that's the best quality option for them. And we know that we've got a fantastic team doing the enrolling and the monitoring of that modality. But it's not an option that everyone's aware of, and not one that you're necessarily going to find out about unless you're connecting with someone at a resource and referral agency. I believe I also mentioned that it appeals to folks who need more flexible schedules. because again, it's a friend or relative and they're not trying to accommodate the schedules of several different children when that's the case. The other thing that actually talking to someone about what your needs are does is it enables that person to help you think outside of the box, even just when it comes to location. So is there a huge childcare shortage? Yes, everywhere across the state. However, what we hear, because we are in contact with the childcare providers on a regular basis, and we're doing updates to our system because our system has every licensed and registered childcare program in it, is that there are slots. There's even infant toddler slots, right? There's programs that are having trouble filling their slots, but they may not be in the area that a family is looking for care, because the majority of people call us looking for care around their home. There tends to be a bit of resistance when it comes to placing children in care around their work, but it is something that will encourage them. We'll say, okay, I'm picturing your neighborhood. You gave me your address. Let me tell you, you're going to have trouble finding a slot in that area. Is there another place that's convenient? Where is it that you work? Let's take a look. Let's see what's around that work area. Or is there somewhere between home and work that you would feel comfortable locating that care? Because we're able to advise them on what areas that they're going to find more options available to them. And also where, if it is a family that is in need of using childcare assistance, then our database also tells us which programs are accepting childcare assistance from the county. I think this is one area where my own journey kind of fits in really well, because I really kind of logistically had the same family situation with both of my children, but I wanted very different care for them because they taught me what they needed when they came out. My daughter was born feisty as feisty could get. She needed to start care around 8 weeks, and needed a huge amount of interaction. I was a fairly new employee here at that time, so I had some experience with home-based childcare, but not a ton. And all of my professional experience had been in center-based care. And so in my head, of course, she was going to a center. And then I met this baby who needed constant interaction. And this baby who also took 45 minutes to drink a bottle because she had a lot going on. And after talking with really the experts here within this building, I understood that for this particular child, I was likely going to need to find a family daycare. Not just a family daycare, but a family daycare that has a lot of preschool and school-age children enrolled, because they could be just loving that baby, right up in her face. And the thing is, this is why childcare is not one size fits all, because the thought of that would horrify some families. But that is what I wanted. I wanted those kids, those big kids, to be up in my baby's face because I knew that that's what my baby needed. And so the childcare navigator's job is to really get to the root of what that parent is looking for, and then find all sorts of creative ways to do searches or suggest things, or even offer that family questions to ask when they do go and tour locations, and explore different modalities. My son was born, he would have been fine no matter where I put that baby, because he was just born happy and chunky. As long as someone kept feeding him, he was good. But definitely something where I needed to work that out with people who had the most experience with different programs and different modalities within our county. The third reason why people need to call us instead of just searching online that they report back to us is the connection to other community resources that we offer during that phone call. So very, very infrequently does a family call us and there not be any other needs. So quite often we refer to 211 because they have the most up-to-date information on human services and everything that exists within the county. But there are usually pretty specific themes. So healthcare, housing, we refer quite often to WIC and Help Me Grow, Parent Network for developmental screenings. All of these things happen, they come out during that call with a child care navigator because they all have an impact on that family's ability to find quality care, access it, and also go to work or school. The next population that we serve through our services is the child care providers themselves. So we provide continuing education, coaching, credentialing, and quality improvement projects. We also have a food program that provides over 1 million healthy meals and snacks annually to children in childcare. And then our childcare registration team opens and monitors family childcare homes as well as school-age childcare programs. And I mentioned earlier, we also have our legally exempt department that enrolls friend and relative care. For the community, that's our last pocket there. We work with local business leaders to help them understand how high quality childcare impacts their workforce. We also advocate with state and local legislators to provide better supports for providers and help ease the financial burden of childcare for families, which we just saw is quite a burden. So this also falls within that childcare navigation piece that we have, because we know that in order to best serve parents, we need to help their employers to serve them and their schools. So we do a lot of work with area employers, workforce development programs, and higher education to streamline the assistance in finding quality childcare for their employees and for their students. One of the other things that we find ourselves helping with, because we know that, again, it's not as simple as just running a list and finding a program. So one of the other things that we walk businesses and employers and workforce programs through is understanding things like flexible scheduling, how that can help parent employees, particularly moms, navigate this turbulence with childcare, or also things like flexible scheduling, or at least flexible scheduling, but also remote work options, anything that's going to enable that working parent to tap into the childcare that actually meets their needs and is dependable, so that they can show up at school or work and do their best. If that means that things are adjusted by an hour here or there, I'm just going to say, especially if it's a mom, we know she's going to get the work done, right? So how can we honor that and not shy away from it as much? Dependent care savings accounts is something that employers can offer information on. And then employer sponsored care, which is like the no-brainer, but also the unicorn. And then this one can sometimes be controversial, but we also like to do a great deal of talking about babies at work program. I wouldn't bring it up if we don't walk the walk, but we do. We actually just wrapped up a babies at work program with, I think, our 8th baby here at Child Care Resource Network. It's a program that we implemented here and is replicable in a wide variety of settings. Obviously, some of them are not appropriate, but would enabling your parent employees to bring their baby with them to work for the first 6 to 8 months or until they're mobile be beneficial? The research says yes. Our experience here says yes. It's a morale builder. It enables people time to find the right setting for their child when that child does go into care. And we know that the most scarce slots right now are for those infants. So it's a good return on investment, and it's a good morale booster. And women tend to come back more readily than they may otherwise. I can tell you my oldest, well, both of my children were enrolled in the Babies at Work program here, but we had a pandemic for one of them. But the first one did come, she came to the office. My job was primarily in the field. So she came for the first 2 weeks I was back, and then she came on 2 days a week, and the other 3 days of the week I was in the field until she decided to be mobile. And I can tell you that I may not have come back if that wasn't an option, because it felt like leaving my arm somewhere. Like it just, but that transition then when she did need to go into care and not be with me was tremendously easier because the people around me knew my baby. So it wasn't as if I was entering this world where she didn't exist. And I had the time to select the care that was really best for us. Next slide, which is actually, rest assured, going to be my last one. So these are just some resources on finding quality resources for childcare. The first one is Childcare Resources Network. The next one is the Office of Child and Family Services, which is also where you can go to find a resource and referral agency, a CCR&R within York County, if you are not Erie County. And then 211 Western New York is generally our go-to for all things human services, for all of those things that are maybe kind of childcare, but also more complicated because they can send you where you need to be.
Well, thank you very, very much, Kristin. I know I learned a lot about how to find resources, especially scarce resources. And I also really want to thank you for sharing so much of your personal story with us. It's obvious that the organization has a lot to offer and can help navigate many of the challenges that most of us are facing. At this point, I want to introduce my friend, Sheri Scavone. She's the CEO of the Western New York Women's Foundation. She has been there for over 20 years. She is a licensed physical therapist, and she also has her executive leadership degree from RIT. You will find no one else who cares more about women's issues and female empowerment than Sheri. So it is my pleasure to warmly welcome Sheri to wrap us up before we go into Q&A. Sheri?
Thanks, Peggy, and thank you also Kristin and Mara for all of the information. I do want to note on that mapping tool that Mara spoke of. Annika put the link to it. It is a free tool available to everyone, and particularly to businesses was the purpose. We commissioned the Cornell IRL in Buffalo to create that map. It was a project of the Western York Women's Foundation and the Oshai Foundation. So I want to give them a shout out for jumping into this with us. It was identified for a particular need, both for businesses and for home-based providers that were really struggling, as Kristin said, with filling their slots because people don't know they exist. They may not have a huge playground or a huge sign out in front. I am really happy to say that we have been advocating for a year and have managed to get the state under their Business Navigator program to cover the cost of contracting with Cornell and expanding that map across the state. So we did it for Erie and Niagara counties. There was a lot of interest in the other Western New York counties and beyond. So that will be in process and available, particularly if any of you have friends, relatives, or business associates or centers in other areas of New York State, it should be a really great free tool to use. So I'm just going to touch upon affordability. We talk about childcare and childcare as a disproportionate barrier for women in terms of quality, affordability, and accessibility. And I will emphasize the quality piece. Part of our mapping tool and part of Kristin's database is on a daily basis. That tool and Kristin's database is updated to make sure that the providers on there do not have any issues with regard to care. And that they have all the certifications and licensure and everything else that they need. We really have to give a shout out to our childcare workforce. They are incredibly undervalued, as is all of our caretakers. They are largely women and women of color in this state. And they are doing incredible work, and we continue to advocate to have them compensated in a way that is reflective of their education and the tasks that they have. But in New York State, and in New York State, and in fact, in the nation, there's a program called CCDBG that funnels money down from the federal government to the state government. And then from the state government, the way New York State does it is it goes to each of the counties. 3 years ago, each of the counties set the limits on that affordability, on that eligibility for child care subsidy. And we had everything from 125% in Niagara County to 200%, which was the maximum at that time in Erie County. But literally, if a family moved across the street, they risked losing their child care subsidy and not even knowing that. So part of our advocacy work, both on the New York State Child Care Availability Task Force and as a leader in the Empire State Campaign for Children, and with organizations like CCRN and PPG and others in this community, we've been trying to lift up this idea of kind of a uniform eligibility for child care subsidy. I am happy to say that we went to 200% across the board, then 300% across the board. And just in the last budget, not the budget that passed last week, but the 23-24 budget, the eligibility expanded to 85% of the state median income, which is a pretty complex thing to understand. And you really don't need to, because we have created this chart. This one pager is available for you, for your businesses and institutions. We also have another one for businesses that talk about ways that businesses can support childcare from an affordability standpoint. And our work with businesses and the Buffalo Niagara Partnership with the mapping tool indicated that they had no idea that this subsidy was even available. So part of it is educating the employers to be able to talk in the place of employment about this resource, particularly if someone's coming in and saying, I have to leave employment because I can't afford my childcare. If they can't find childcare, we send them over to Kristin. If they can't afford it, we assist them with completing this application, or at least the information. It is a standard application across the state. But as you can see from this chart, the eligibility guidelines have significantly increased. So a family of 4 can be earning $90,000 and qualify for child care subsidy assistance for their children. The other thing that happened is the copay, the part that families had to pay, similar to a copay for your health insurance, was 35% in Erie County. That was the maximum amount. And what we found, it was actually prohibitive. We had brought a special program into Erie County for those earning a little bit more money at the time. And the 35% of the subsidy was actually prohibitive for families to be able to pay, so they couldn't accept the subsidy. We were able to incrementally reduce that to 10% and now to 1%. I will say, while we're not happy with the state budget that was just enacted in terms of its support for childcare and families, the federal government has just put out new guidelines, and part of that is this 1% copay, which New York has already implemented. So in a couple of ways, New York has implemented some things that are just becoming due. I will also say, from an ease of affordability standpoint, there is a movement and a charge for the Office of Child and Family Services in New York to put the application for this process online. which is really important. And also extraordinarily important, and we are really pushing, is what's called presumptive eligibility, which means if the family income threshold is 85% of the state median income, that is well beyond the eligibility threshold for other public benefits like SNAP, which is 200% of the federal poverty guideline. So if they've already qualified for public benefits that are 200% of the federal poverty line, they should automatically, we should be presuming that they qualify for childcare assistance and not put them back through yet another process with the same paperwork. So there are continued initiatives to make the affordability more accessible. That's some of the accessibility part for our working families as well. But New York State has really gone out in front with this 85% state median income, 1% of copays. And again, we can make this one pager available, but at the bottom, it has both Kristin's organization, Child Care Resource Network, which we work very closely with, and Child Care of Niagara. Again, to Kristin's point, there are child care resource and referral networks in most of the major counties, and they represent or are responsible for any of the smaller counties surrounding them. And then the last piece of this is, we encourage you to join us in terms of what you can do to continue to make childcare accessible, affordable, and high quality. We at the foundation have a number of initiatives that we are working with. Again, we usually work in tandem with coalitions of statewide advocates. Recently, I was asked by Senator Gillibrand to sit on her childcare committee to inform a platform for childcare for the next session, which we're super excited about because at the end of the day, the money trickles down from the federal government. Just a bit of trivia, you should all know that in 1970, a bipartisan US Congress approved universal childcare for all families in the US, and it was vetoed by the president then, and I'll let you go Google who that was. So, we in all these years have not come far enough. We were there in 1970. And ultimately, that's what we want to do is have universal kind of sliding scale childcare, and to do so where we are compensating the childcare providers at a level of school kindergarten teachers. Again, it's the same education, it's the same level of work, and yet most of our childcare providers not only aren't paid anywhere close to that, but they also, in many cases, have no benefits. And one additional caveat is childcare providers are also having to close because they can't get insurance. So yet another issue that collectively our stakeholders and our leaders really need to get their arms around. Childcare is the business on which all other businesses grow, as we like to say. So what can you do about it? Certainly getting to know your local legislators. We have a very supportive Western New York delegation. They are well informed. We have been really beating the drums with them for many, many years. But at the end of the day, they have to go into the chamber with their colleagues and be able to make a case and to prioritize childcare over some of the other things that people want to prioritize. And so we always encourage you to call or write your New York State legislators to advocate for universal childcare. If you're out this summer at events and you see your legislator parading around or in parades, please tell them that childcare is important and tell them your story. So Kristin's story is so compelling. And one of the things that we ask is for you to share your story with us, because we get calls on a regular basis from the media in particular. And we talk with our stakeholders and elected officials on a regular basis. And if we can carry a real life story of a woman who had to leave the workforce because she couldn't find or afford childcare, of families that had to move to be closer to grandma to care for their child because they can't find or afford childcare. Those kinds of stories are really, really critical in our work, and we would love for you to share them with us. And we have shared in the chat the white paper that the Western New York Women's Foundation recently released as part of a 6-part series of Pathways to Progress, Accelerating the Possibilities, that highlight even more of the data that Mara shared at the beginning of this, which really should be a compelling call to action for all of us. So I encourage you to use that data and to know the facts. And the last piece of how to be educated and know who to call or write is we encourage any of you to join something that we have called Women in Action. It can be found on our website, and maybe Annika can put the link in. But Women in Action is a monthly educational newsletter that talks about kind of a deep dive into the issues disproportionately impacting women. And then when we have a call to action, like we need you to call the governor's office and say, you know, put this amount of money in the budget for childcare, we know that you're at the other end of that. Our advocacy committee is looking to have 1,000 women and our male allies signed up for Women in Action by the end of the year. And again, that's powerful to be able to go to a legislator and say, listen, you support this, and we've got 1,000, people at the other end of the button that we can push and get them to help and make phone calls. So we encourage you to be part of our Women in Action team and to use your voice, particularly if you are a parent or you work with parents or you are a business struggling with the childcare issue, to help us elevate the issue of the issues within affordable, quality, and accessible childcare. So I will stop there, Peggy, and you can open it up.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sheri. It sounds as though there are a tremendous amount of resources available, probably that not everybody in the community knows about. So I really encourage everybody on this call to reach out and share this information. The facts and the figures are important, but so is what to do about a universal problem. I'd like to take a moment to just remind you that we have a whole series of Pathway to Progress calls coming up over the next couple of months. You can go to the Western New York Women's Foundation and look at the website and register and see what's coming up. But the next one coming up is going to be really, really strong in terms of helping women master financial literacy. And I can speak from experience. It was scary stuff when I became a single mother and a single woman. And it's just so important to know how to navigate your way around. So on May 22nd, we're going to have a session to help you with that. But right now, Nika, if you wouldn't mind just showing us and opening up to Q&A. And maybe because we have a smaller crowd, we can see everybody's beautiful faces. Does anybody have any questions? I didn't notice anything in the Q&A box.
I did have a question. So in years past, we've had this kind of, I wouldn't call it a problem, but sometimes the county didn't spend all their child subsidy dollars, and then they'd pull them back because they'd say, oh, we don't need them. People aren't asking for them. So my question is, I love the 1%. I love the eligibility. Is the county now spending all or most of the child subsidy dollars they kind of allocate or get from whomever?
Yeah, Mary Jo, so based on the increased eligibility that both the percent of FPL and now SMI and the reduction in family copay and then some other categorical increases in eligibility, the county has been spending all its money. At one point I think I talked to the county in March, and their monthly allotment, what they typically would spend, had just significantly increased. Like by March, they had expended most of what they did the year before. What has happened over the last couple of years, and this is a result of really, I think, of the New York State Child Care Availability Task Force being in the ear nonstop with OCFS, is OCFS has been actually refunding mid-cycle counties that are running out of money. So you'll recall that I believe it was around 2016 17, the county had, Erie County had 658 people on a waiting list, and we, raised a little ruckus about that, which didn't go over really well. It's definitely not a way to win friends and influence people, but we made the point, and so they closely monitor now that expenditure, and they've been able to, I think, really do a very good job of shuffling money in pools of funding. Ultimately, the recommendation of the task force is to have one system in New York State so that we don't get into these pools of funding. I know that there's counties who don't expend their money and it sits there in their contract, right? They can't pull that back. They'll lose it and then they do a rollover or reappro. But that ability to be more fluid in knowing how much you have and where you have, as opposed to we're going to divide it up amongst 62 counties. I mean, can you imagine, right? So, and it's based, as you know, on past utilization, which is not always indicative, particularly after COVID, of what it is moving forward. So yes, they are expending. Obviously, they're based on, $1. There is less money for less families because of the expansive nature of, so one of the other advocacy things was they're now paying 80% of the market rate as opposed to 69 percentile of market rate. So that changed last session. We were able to finally get a little bit of budge in that. So they're paying more per kid. They're paying more because the parents only paying 1% copay, and they're paying for more people because of eligibility.
Great.
Thank you.
There's another
Good to hear.
question in the chat box from Kelly, and that is, what criteria should parents consider when evaluating the quality of childcare?
I did follow up with a link in there to I linked to OCFS's documents on quality indicators. We do also have a section on our website at Child Care Resource Network for this, as does likely most local CCR&R. So that can give you a good breakdown. It breaks things down by the types of care and by age, the kinds of things you want to be looking for. But what we tell people when they call is you really need to go visit in person and get a feeling. Mother's instinct is not to be underrated. But generally you want to make sure that they're following state guidelines. I would go and pull up the programs on the OCFS website to look at regulatory history, knowing though that staffing across the board has been very challenging for programs. And the majority of programs that you're going to look up will have some kind of regulatory history. And if you have a question about a violation that you see posted there on OCFS's website, you can call the program and ask them what it was. You can also call OCFS and ask questions about what it was. They can't reveal confidential information, but they can explain more about what the particular violation was, because some of them sound very scary and they really were a paperwork issue. In other cases, they were very scary and avoid, right? But definitely there's resources out there, right from Office of Child and Family Services and your resource and referral agency.
That's great. Did we answer your question, Kelly? She says yes. Well, that's great. Well, we've got 5 minutes left for any Q&A, or if anybody has, Mary Jo, you're raising your finger.
I have another question.
Awesome.
So this is something that we've talked about in the advocacy committee and in a couple of other committees, of this aspirational goal of universal childcare. And I know that Sheri has talked about that sort of being on the agenda of a couple of these statewide groups. What I've yet to see is, and maybe they're working on this, is a definition of what does universal childcare mean. And as I think before we can ask for it at the state level or the federal level, we kind of have to define, what are we asking for? What would that look like for all parents, working parents with great jobs, working parents with, minimum wage jobs, one parent families, two parent families, even parents maybe who are in school or not working. But Sheri, are we getting there? Are we starting to define what that means?
Yeah, we actually defined it. That was one of the first things we did in the New York State Child Care Availability Task Force, was to be very clear that if that was the North Star, we needed to define it, to your point. So we have that, and I've actually shared it with Senator Gillibrand. What I will say that we don't have, we have studied the Quebec model, and we've studied the military model, and we have looked at New York City proposed model. We don't have the logistics of how it would work, right? We know how it works in Quebec and how it works in some other areas. So the model is there, like what would need to be included, and with a significant lens for equity. The logistics of working that out are TBD. That's actually supposed to be the work of the current New York State Child Care Availability Task Force, but we haven't convened since last November. And we are pushing that. The other thing I'll say that we did not mention here, but the return on investment for childcare is proven to be a minimum of 2 to 1. Cornell just did a report for the state. It was over 2 to 1. The Federal Reserve in Minnesota suggests it can be as high as 18% when you look at recidivism and juvenile justice issues and mental health needs. And so the frustrating part for us is, how do we not, get a state to say, listen, this is the best investment we could make, right? We can't invest our money anywhere else and get a 2 to 1 minimum return. And that's just payroll tax. And that's been proven. If you look at the Quebec model, which is now throughout Canada, that is absolutely proven that just the return on investment from payroll taxes of women returning to the workforce pay for the program. So we can share the principles of universal childcare. I also just want to answer, Kelly asked a question about the high cost of childcare. We do have a document that breaks down why childcare costs so much. But basically, it is the ratios. So particularly in the infant area. So, you can only have X number of children per educated certified adult. And so it's not, I always use the example of, if the cost of cheese goes up, I increase the cost of your pizza at the pizzeria that I own. But if I'm running a childcare center, and the minimum wage goes up, as it has how many times, I can't bring in more kids to that center to offset that. And if I'm accepting subsidy, which most of the home-based in particular do, I can't raise the rates. So it's almost an insulated system that doesn't allow, it's a horrible business model. Let's just put it that way. It's a horrible business model, but it is created, those ratios are created with the safety and health and welfare of children in mind. There are some discussions. We have talked, a local assemblywoman approached us because the ratios for older children in New York State, child to adult, is much lower than, or much higher, sorry, so less kids per adult than in many other states, and than is school. So if a child is in school, it's 24 to 1, and then they go to an aftercare, the aftercare is, Kristen, help me out now, I can't remember, 12 to 1. Yeah, it's much lower, right? So like, what's the difference between that child in school and that child in the child care center? So, and those kids require, less assistance. So there's more of a profit margin, if you will, than an infant. So that is one of the advocacy points to try to make. And Kristen, I don't know if, or Kelly, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's all about the ratios, really.
Have they thought,
Thank you,
Sheri, about who will in this system of universal childcare, where will the regulation for that be housed? Will it be in OCFS or will it be in the Department of Education?
Yeah, we've had that discussion many a time. The Department of Education doesn't want to come to the table. I mean, we've had it a lot because of the pre-K 4 and 3 issues. DOE is really their own world, and the governor doesn't even they don't even report to the governor. So if I was a guessing person, I would say it would remain in OCFS, and that actually is where the money from CCDBG at a federal level comes down to.
I think that's a better place because I think the Department of Education, you'll get the outcomes in the model will look different than they'll have a different lens than OCFS in terms of, I hate to say this, but the nurturing lens will change.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do every day with kids will change.
Yeah.
So I prefer it stay where it, in OCFS. I don't know. It's been my feeling for years.
Mary Jo, it's a really great point. It's one of the things that we we're not tackling, I guess, working alongside in different areas throughout the state as CCR&Rs too, is now being called in by school districts to do quality improvement in those UPKs and these UP3s, and trying to kind of bridge those two worlds, because there's bridging that's needed for sure. So my hope is that if it does end up in DOE land, that at least we can infuse, but definitely
Okay.
your point is heard.
Well, the
Great
timeline
conversation, Peggy.
it happened before I die. So let's get this done.
That's an ultimatum. Go ahead, Peggy.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the wonderful questions from everybody. More importantly, I think we owe a little bit of a thank you to everybody who have worked so hard on developing this information and gathering resources so that we can help other women. I know our next one is May 22nd, and I'm really looking forward to talking about women's financial literacy. But in the meanwhile, there are lots of ways that you can reach out to the community. And here are many of them. Reach out to us and join us and have comments on LinkedIn and Instagram, Facebook. Go to our website. There's a ton of information out there to help you navigate the issues that women are facing. If you have a friend, bring her next time. We certainly love to see more people on the call next time. And thank you so much to everybody who spoke and everybody who's worked so hard on change. Thank you.